About the next question. The question from Sally Sweet is, how do eagles handle post-meal detritus of bones, feathers, etc., and do they ever tidy up? Well, from time to time, you may notice that the eagles have buried some of the remains of coots or fish that were left in the nest after a meal. Some of those things are just going to dry up naturally and degrade. So the eagles really don't have to worry about it too much. How about the next question? All right, Mary Powell, Andrew Shaw, and Mrs. Sanders' third grade class love getting questions from school classes. How big is the eagle's nest and how much does it weigh? Well, our nest is approximately about 5 feet in diameter right now. We're not sure how much it weighs, but some eagle nests have been estimated to weigh around 2 tons, and that would be a very, very large nest. So our nest has a way to go yet before it gets to be that big. All right, we have a live question coming in from Twitter, and this is from Mrs. Dingler's third grade class. Why did Dad bury the unhatched egg? All right, so that would go along with the eagles burrowing the debris that's left from a meal. I think that the male eagle suspects that the egg is not viable, it's not going to hatch, and so he's just doing this to kind of push the egg out of the way. They don't have the ability to take the egg out of the nest, but they just want to get it out of the way, and that's why he buried it. Okay, when does the female leave her baby? And that question is from Grayson Sanford. She will leave the baby from time to time, take a break. Dad will come in and take her place. Both of them will be with the baby pretty much full time for a few weeks, and then once it's large enough to take care of itself a little bit better, then both of them will go off hunting. How about the next question? How old are the eagles? And this is a question from Jack Shaw. We think they're probably somewhere between 5 and 10 years old. We don't know for sure. We think maybe the female is a little bit younger because she still has some black spotting on her tail feathers. But eagles don't get their white head and tails until they're about 4 to 5 years old. And we know they're at least that old. Plus, this isn't their first nesting attempt, so we know that they're older than 4 or 5. Joyce Edgens asks, how far away do they fly and where does it sleep? Well, I assume that means where are they when they're not on the nest. There are a couple of trees very close to the nesting tree that one of the adults will roost in when they're not on the nest. If they're flying to catch coots or fish, then they're flying probably about 2 to 3 miles away from the nest site. And we know that the male spends some time roosting in a tree very close to the nest tree, and that's where he's sleeping. Next question. Ronnie Dunn in Wiley, Texas. When will they decide if the egg is not viable? Well, they can't really tell. I think what happens is that after a while, they'll just decide that it isn't going to hatch. So some eagles will spend more time incubating the egg, and we see that going on right now. And then others will just give up on it after a period of time. So right now, we're just going to have to wait and see what happens. But it's very obvious to us that that egg is not going to hatch. Next question. Okay. Jeff Brown asks, how is the use of technology like this opening up our understanding to these creatures, both from a science point of view and the impact of public being exposed to these eagles' lives in a way that has never been possible? Well, having the nest cam available where you can see what's going on in the nest 24 hours a day gives us insight into these birds' lives that we were never able to really see before. So having this technology is absolutely fabulous. Nest cams are not new. There are several of them out there. And in fact, later on in the springtime, we hope to have a bluebird nest cam that will go live so that you can look into the lives of eastern bluebirds that live here on campus. But it really allows people to see what these birds are doing as part of their everyday life, and especially the importance of what goes on in the nest. Okay, we have a question from Gina Harbit. This is on Twitter. I see many flies buzzing around the remains of meals in the nest. Will maggots present a problem for the eaglet? And the answer to that is no. When we get a little bit warmer in temperatures, the flies do come out, and naturally they're going to go to remains of dead animals. Most of the time, the parents or the eaglets will consume whatever's left of the animal carcass. And if there happen to be maggots on that animal, it's just another source of protein, and it's not going to cause a problem at all. Okay, from Jan and Richard Schultz. Is the great horned owl a predator of the eagle, or is one higher on the food chain than the other? Well, great horned owls have been known to kill eaglets and also have been known to kill adult eagles. It's not so much with adult eagles that the great horned owl is using them as a food source, whereas they would if they could get an eaglet. But it's probably more that when the attack occurred, that the owl was trying to drive the adult eagle away from the nest so that it could capture the eaglet or whatever was there in the nest. Now, the egg hadn't hatched yet. I don't think the great horned owl knew that, but it was recognizing that with an eagle on the nest, there was the possibility of an easy meal there. Okay, Mona asks, how many years do they breed? Well, eagles reach sexual maturity at about 4 to 5 years of age, and they can live to be as long as 25 years. So the possibility is there that they may reproduce every year for about 20 years. Now, in some cases, eagles don't reproduce every year. As you probably know, we have 1 egg that is hatched, 2 were laid. Sometimes eagles will lay 3 eggs, but 2 is the average. So you can add that up and try to figure out how many eaglets might be produced every year for that breeding lifespan of 20 years. Okay, let's see. Ed Winston of Mobile, Alabama asks, is it accurate to call them loving, or is it simply the case that survival requires warmth and this behavior is just sharing body heat? Is this typical of other large birds of prey? Well, these are, of course, wild animals. They're acting on instinct. The nesting behavior is hardwired into their brains, and so they're automatically responding to hormones that tell them that they need to keep the eggs warm, and they also need to keep the nestlings warm. Now, you notice, I'm sure, that the eagles do appear to be very loving and very caring with their eaglet. They're very gentle with it. They are very careful in the size of food items that they're giving to the baby. So I think we can assume that there's some loving there also. Okay, a Twitter question. This is Christina Thompson's 5K class at Old Point Elementary School. How much food does an eaglet eat in one day? Well, you've noticed probably that the eaglet is fed about once an hour during daylight hours. So let's say that it eats about 10 to 12 times a day. And it's not very large right now. Its little stomach doesn't hold very much. So I would say it's probably something like half of a fish to 3/4 of a fish. Okay. Leslie Winkler in Clemson, South Carolina asks, is there any instance in which you would interfere, such as imminent danger? And I know everybody's concerned about what might happen if one of the eagles were hurt or if something happened to the eaglet. Well, bald eagles are protected by the government, by the federal government, and so unless there was an instance where the eagle was hurt and on the ground or very ill, we cannot step in and interfere. Now, we do have a contingency plan in place, If something happened and we found the eagle on the ground, then what we would do is step in, and as a veterinarian, I can administer care enough to stabilize it. Then we would take it over to the University of, or Auburn University in Alabama, where they have a raptor rehab center, and they would take over from there. But no, we wouldn't step in unless it was absolutely necessary. We have a Twitter question from Kyle Steffi, and his first question is, how fast can eagles fly? Well, they can cruise at about 40 miles an hour, and if they're in a dive, they can get up to 100 miles an hour. That's pretty fast. And then his second question is, are they related to dinosaurs? Well, actually, if you go way back in time, the answer to that question is yes, because we know that all birds are descended from a type of dinosaur called a theropod. If you're familiar with Jurassic Park, the velociraptors were a type of theropod dinosaur. And you can kind of see how there are similarities between those dinosaurs and the body of the eagles. All right, so Pam Chestnut asks, is there any way either parent can get the fledgling back into the nest if it can't make it back on its first flight? And the answer to that is no. Once that young eagle leaves the nest, it's basically on its own. Now, hopefully it won't have any issues and it will be able to fly back to the nest. And last year with our 2 eaglets that fledged, both of them did come back to the nest for a period of time. But no, the parents would not say pick it up and take it back to the nest. That's a good question, Pam. All right, Catherine Habansky. We live in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Can we see bald eagles in our state? And if so, where is the best place to look? Well, certainly you could have bald eagles in Connecticut. They're basically in almost every state in the U.S., the lower 48 and Alaska, but they don't occur in Hawaii or in the territories, of course. If you're around a river system or a large lake, then you may well see eagles there. That would be the best place to look. All right, we have a Twitter question from Roger Walterhouse. What dangers does the baby face in the next few weeks? Well, we still are in late winter and early spring. The weather is still in the process of changing. In Georgia, March is a severe weather month, so we would have some concern about a very strong storm, which could blow down the tree or part of the nest. Another concern is always if the parents will have enough food or can find enough food to bring the baby so that it can grow and survive as it needs to. There's also the outside chance of an attack like the great horned owl attack that we had a little while ago. All right, Ashley asks, do you know where the eagles migrate to in the wintertime? Well, our particular eagles are residents year-round, so they are not going to migrate. But eagles from Canada and even parts of Alaska do migrate south. And eagles have been known to go as far south as Florida and also into Mexico. Good question, Ashley. All right. Rebecca Feuerbach asks, what can you tell us concerning the female eagle's health, specifically the coloring under her eyes? Now, we have a number of very good wildlife photographers that have been following the eagles quite extensively, and I've examined some close-up pictures of the female. I did notice that some of the feathering that would normally be under her eyes and before her bill seemed to be missing, but I'm not seeing any coloration of the skin that would indicate any kind of a health problem. But I appreciate your concern on that, Rebecca. Okay, we have an email question from April Van S. Is it likely that the eagle pair will remain in the present nest or will they build somewhere else? Well, as long as the nest and that tree is intact, we expect that the pair will continue to use that nest. Now, we do suspect that originally that nest belonged to a red-tailed hawk pair, and our eagles took it over. We think that maybe they had a nest on another part of the campus property. We do have 27,000 acres of woodlands and forests and the reservoir area. And we think that maybe they had another nest on an unknown part of the property. And perhaps the wind blew that nest down or something happened to the tree and they just simply relocated. All right. Here's a question. As the eagle begins to grow, are you concerned about the mother's left talons as a danger to the eaglet? Well, I'm sure a lot of people are aware that the female does seem to have an injury to her leg and that she doesn't use it as normally as we would expect her to. But eagles naturally will curl in their talons. They ball up their feet when they're on the nest, so they're not going to have the chance of piercing the baby with a talon. And she seems to be doing a pretty good job of doing that, even with her injured leg. So that's another good question. Okay, Judy Viceroy in Cape Girardeau, Missouri asks, can you tell us what we might expect to see in the coming weeks? Well, we expect to see B3, that's what we've dubbed the eaglet, to get bigger and bigger. They can actually gain about 1 pound every 3 to 4 days. So we're going to see a lot of growth going on with that young eaglet. Okay, Jadzia asks, when will the eaglet get his pin feathers and adult coloring? Well, as you probably have observed, he's covered with his fuzzy gray down feathers right now. As time goes on, and in a few weeks, you'll start to see the pin feathers coming in. And before he fledges, which will be about 4 months of age, you'll see that he'll get a completely dark brown set of feathers. He won't look like an adult bald eagle until he's 4 to 5 years of age, and that's when the white head and tail come in. Okay, so we have another Twitter question. Why not name the eagles? Well, we're dubbing our eaglet B3, but we really don't give the eagles human names because, after all, they are wild animals, and we want to respect their freedom and their wild spirits, so I think it's best not to give them a name. All right, Mandy Newsom asks, is it illegal to keep an eagle feather, and how long will mom sit on B3? Okay, that's a great question, Mandy. It is illegal to keep an eagle feather, even if you find one on the ground. I think everybody realizes that Native Americans have used eagle feathers as part of their ceremonies for centuries. And according to the Bald Eagle Protection Act, any feathers that are found are sent to the federal government where they're kept in a repository, and then tribes using feathers can get those feathers for ceremonial use. But if you do find a feather on the ground, and this is really true for all birds, that it is technically illegal to keep them, so I would discourage anybody from doing that. Okay, and her second question was, how long will the mother continue to sit on B3? Well, the baby is still, his body is still learning how to maintain its own temperature. So they will continue to keep the baby warm for another couple of weeks, and that's going to be especially true if we have large temperature swings. All right, Deb Link sent us an email. When can you tell what the sex of the eaglet is? Well, I'm sure somebody with a sharper eye than I have can probably tell already. Female eaglets, and this is true for adults too, the females are larger than the males, and then also the depth of the bill, and that would be from the top of the bill down to their chin, is a little bit deeper in females. Now, personally, I would have to see a male and female together in order to tell that. I'm just not, don't have quite the good eye to see that difference. And the male, you probably have noticed, the male's head is very smooth, and the female has more of a shaggier head. We like to say that she sort of looks like she has a Farrah Fawcett hairdo. But, and you notice when the two of them together that she is quite a bit larger. And that's something that's very typical of birds of prey, not just for bald eagles. Okay, we have an email from Caroline with a K. Are berry eagles tagged so you can monitor them? Well, the answer to that is no. They don't have leg bands, and they don't have any type of a radio tag where we can follow their movements. And the reason that that isn't the case is that just capturing a bird and placing a band on it is a very stressful situation for a bird, and we certainly don't want to interfere with their normal nesting process. Now, of course, we would love to be able to know where they go when they're not on the nest, and when they spend, or where they spend their time when they're outside of the nesting season. But we have no plans of actually banding them or putting any type of identification on them at this time. Bonnie Jean on Twitter says, will they only have one eaglet this year? And that does look to be the case. Since the second egg didn't hatch, we are only expecting to have the one eaglet. They're getting outside of the normal time period that they would have to lay another egg. So that's a good question too. Now, one thing about just having one eaglet, it's not that unusual when there are 2 or 3 eaglets in the nest that one eaglet becomes very dominant. And on occasion, that dominant eagle will kill its siblings. Now, with us just having one eaglet, of course, that won't happen. That also means that the parents won't have to spend as much time hunting to feed B3 as they would if there were 2 or 3 eaglets in the nest. So it's actually better for them as well. You can imagine how much energy they have to expend when they're out hunting in order to catch that coot or that fish. And if they're only feeding one eaglet, that means there's more food for that eaglet, less competition, and also the parents themselves are going to have plenty to eat. Okay. Is there something about the egg that tells us it will not hatch? Well, I don't see anything visually wrong with the egg. I think it just simply was not fertile, or that the embryo failed to develop. Now, visually, it appears to be intact at this point of time. You don't see any change of color that would tell us that it's inviable. We're going by calendar days, where a typical 35-day incubation period has passed. We're actually quite a few days after the expected hatching date, so we're sure at this point in time that the egg isn't going to hatch. Okay, if you just tuned in, wanted to remind everybody I'm Renee Carleton, and we are live streaming at Berry College. If you have your questions, you can send them to #BC Eagle Chat or to publicrelations@berry.edu. All right. Mike Proctor wants to know, when will B3 most likely will B3 most likely stay in the area? Well, probably for a few weeks after B3 leaves the nest, that eaglet will still be around. After that, young eagles take a very long migration. A lot of the young eagles will move north. And in fact, there was research that was done on eagles being raised in Florida that showed that within a few weeks after they left the nest, they actually went on a journey of over 1,000 miles. Many of them ended up in the northern states in the U.S. and also in Canada. So we don't know where B3 will go. We don't know where the 2 eaglets that fledged last year ended up. Sometimes they will come back to their home area, but many times they don't. So they will be off on their own and find their own territories to set up their own families. So what the future holds for B3, we don't know yet. Okay, Lyra Griffith asks, how long does it take an eagle to build a nest? Well, it takes a pretty long period of time, actually. You can imagine if they start a nest in a tree that is the right shape, they're looking for a tree with a nice sturdy fork that's being formed by the branches. They're going to bring in a branch one by one and start assembling that nest gradually. The eagles do continue to bring nesting material in on an almost constant basis, starting in late summer and then throughout the breeding season. On occasion, that they will even come back to the nest in the summertime and do some tidying up. So as far as how long it takes the nest to actually be completed, I would have to say it takes at least 3 months. Now, Berry is the perfect habitat for eagles with our 27,000 acres. We have one of the remaining natural stands of longleaf pine trees in the United States. Longleaf pine are considered to be endangered species, and we're very fortunate to have that native stand here. One of my colleagues in the biology department, Dr. Cipollini, has done extensive research. He and his students have done prescribed burns and treatments to make sure that these longleaf pines do continue to be the magnificent trees that they have. Dr. Cipollini and his students are also very involved in the continuation of the American chestnut. And that just shows, again, the diversity that we have here on campus. There's so many research opportunities in forest ecology and in my particular field, which is avian biology and avian disease research. So we're very lucky that we have such an amazing place on which to conduct our research. Let's see, we have a question from Betsy Lurie, and her question is, what percentage survive their first flights? Now, that is a very variable number. I have seen numbers as high as 40% do not survive their first flight. We know that our 2 eaglets from last year fledged just fine. They didn't have any issues and stayed around for a few weeks, and then they went off on their long journey. So yes, just taking that first step is dangerous for young eagles, but remember that these are birds and they have been designed, evolved to be flighted animals, so it's their nature to be able to leave that nest and take their first flight without too much trouble. Okay, so if you just tuned in, I'm Renee Carleton, and we are live streaming at Berry College. If you have questions, just feel free to send them to hashtag BCEagleChat or email at publicrelations@berry.edu. And we're about halfway through our chat session today, so we have lots of time for your questions. Okay, all right, so Mandy Newson sent a question in through Twitter. How long will B3 stay with or near the parents after fledging? And we expect that B3 will stay here with his or her parents for about 2 to 4 weeks after that first flight from the nest. And we also have a similar question. Oh, this is a question about the Nest Cam camera itself from Birdie in South Carolina. Will there be sound next year? Well, we're going to look into that. As you know, there's not sound right now. A lot of people have noticed that the eagles appear to be vocalizing when, especially when one eagle is coming in to relieve the other. And it would be a lot of fun to hear what they're chatting to each other about if we could listen in. So we'll see. I mean, and on the other hand, though, being that high up in a tree, the nest is about 90 feet off the ground, there would be a lot of wind noise, and that would probably make the watching experience not as good as it currently is. So we'll look into that, Birdie, but right now that decision has not been made. Okay, have a question from Abby Leathers. And that's a 12th grade science class. What rituals do eagles use for mating? Well, they do have some very ritualized behaviors that they do. You've probably heard that a male and female will fly to a very great height, and then they'll actually lock their talons together and tumble through the air, kind of a chicken, see who's going to let loose first. Occasionally they have been known to actually fall to the ground and still remain attached. So what they're doing is they're sizing each other up. They want to make sure that the mate that they choose is going to give their offspring the best opportunity for survival. And so those flying skills that eagles develop and also the strength that is inherent in their bodies is very important, and that is part of the ritual to assess if each other are going to be really good mates. Okay, we have a question, is there security around the tree? All right, the nest tree is in what we call the buffer zone by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service rules. You have to have a certain amount of space around the tree where no one can come in or disturb that particular area. We do have an interpretive sign that's placed near the tree. It's outside the buffer zone, and we have warning signs to let people know that this is the area that belongs to the eagles. Now, campus safety does patrol the area so that we know that someone won't come in and disturb the nest where they're not supposed to. Okay, yeah. And we do have a lot of people that come to view the nest. On weekends especially, there will often be 20 or 30 people outside the buffer zone watching. A lot of photographers come and take pictures of the eagles coming in and out of the nest. And some people will just bring their lawn chairs and ice chests and make kind of a picnic day out of it. So they do have quite a large following of people who come as far away as 2 or 3 hours to come and see the eagles in person. So if you want to come, if you're not too far away, you're more than welcome to come and see them. We just simply ask that you leave your pets at home, that you leave everything as you found it, that you respect the eagles' privacy, no loud music, try to keep your voices down to a minimum so that we can continue to enjoy the eagles on campus. Okay, Becca Furtzer is asking, is it common for males to want to nest with the eaglets? Okay, the male does come in, I'm sure you've observed, and take care of the eaglet as well as the female. Now, the female does spend most of the time with the eaglet. About 70% of the time you see the female in the nest. But the male does come in and relieve the female so that she can go off and take a break. And he will also feed the nestling and keep him warm and make sure that everything's okay. So it's just part of being an eagle pair that the male does have some of the responsibility of taking care of the eaglet, but the female does do most of it. Okay, from Ms. Gilbert's 6th grade class and Mrs. Abbott's, will the eagles always live in this nest or will they move? Well, we hope that they will stay there for the rest of the time that they're a pair. They possibly could leave. Now, we wouldn't expect that to happen unless the tree fell down. You know, trees do have their own lifespan. There's an outside chance that it could get hit by lightning, or if we had a very severe storm, that tree would go down. In that case, the eagles would find another tree to build a nest in and then start nesting again, but we expect them to be with us for a very long period of time. And you know, windstorms and hailstorms, snowstorms occasionally occur here in Georgia, just like any place else in the United States. Eagles are subject to the weather. We had a snowstorm here while the eggs were being incubated, and you probably saw that at one period of time the female had quite a lot of snow on her back, and there was also snow all around the nest. But that's part of nature, and they have learned to deal with those situations and adapt, making the best of what nature gives them. So we do expect for them to be here a long time. Okay, our next question is, can you recommend a good reference for learning about eagles? And that comes from Joanne Donnelly. Well, Joanne, if you're familiar with the public broadcasting systems show Nature, they have a very good hour-long presentation on the American bald eagle, and that's available through Nature's online website. Just click on full episodes and put eagle in the search bar, and you should come up with that video. There are also a number of great resources on the internet where you can get more information about eagles. I particularly like Cornell University's Lab of Ornithology website, which is allaboutbirds.org. You can find out about any kind of bird you're curious in, not just eagles, but they have lots and lots of great information, photographs and range maps, and also vocalizations. So if you want to hear what an eagle call sounds like, then you can just go to that website and click on the link and you'll hear an eagle. Okay, Angela and Ashley want to know what is the largest prey they have been known to kill. All right, so for our pair, what we have observed primarily are coots, which is a type of waterfowl, and then ducks, and that seems to be about the largest prey animal that they have taken. Now, they will also kill fish, and we have some large fish in our rivers here, some largemouth bass, and also some catfish. And I think the largest fish that we've seen in the nest is about that big. So, I mean, I would be pleased to catch a fish that big, so I think the eagles are doing a pretty good job. Okay, Mrs. Gilbert and Mrs. Abbott's class again want to know, how much do eagles weigh? And the answer to that would be around 14 pounds. So if you think about the size of a Thanksgiving turkey, which for most families is going to be around 16 pounds, the body of an eagle is going to be about that size. So they're not small birds by any means. All right, so again, if you just tuned in, I'm Renee Carleton, and we are live streaming at Berry College. If you have questions, send them via Twitter at #BCEagleChat, or you can email us your question at publicrelations@berry.edu. All right. Susan Oilranger, I hope I pronounced your name right, Susan. Has anyone noticed a difference in behavior from mom towards dad since recovering the unhatched egg? Well, I haven't noticed any difference. I think the female is a bit more dominant than the male. I did notice a lot of times during nest building that he would bring in a nest or a tree limb, and she would arrange it the way she wanted it. He might put it in a certain spot, but she would take that nest and put it where, or that limb and put it where she wanted it. So I don't think she's upset with him about burying the egg. She just simply uncovered it and then continued to roll it as she normally would during incubation. So I don't think her attitude toward him has changed at all. Okay. Mandy Newsom sent us a question. Oh, let's see. Okay, that's an older question. Mary Dykes, there is a report of a second nest on campus, and any more information on that eagle couple. Okay, Mary, it is true. We do have a second nest on campus. It's located about 6.5 to 7 miles from the nest that is on the Eagle camera. It's in a very remote area of campus. It's in a very inaccessible area. There are no roads nearby. It was actually discovered by a pair of former Berry students who are now working for the Georgia Department of Natural Resources, and they were marking some boundary lines and observed the nest and the pair of eagles around that nest. Now, we don't really have any good way of getting up there on a regular basis and watching their progress, and we have no plans of putting a nest cam on that particular nest because of the remote location. But it is true, we do have another nest on campus. Okay, so Ray wants to know, how do the eagles learn to hunt? Do the parents actually teach the eaglet? Well, in a way, yes, but in a way, no. Basically, what the eaglet does after fledging is it will follow its parents around as they're fishing or catching coots. And eventually, it will try that on its own. Now, a lot of eagles do eat roadkill and carrion, things that they find. In some cases, they will actually steal prey from other birds of prey, say like a red-tailed hawk. So they're very, very opportunistic. So the young eagle will basically watch what the parents are doing, but they're not really teaching it per se. And this really brings up an opportunity for me to talk about eagles and the consumption of roadkill or carrion. Okay, again, eagles are very opportunistic, and I'm sure everybody has observed like a dead possum or raccoon or something on the side of the road. And yes, eagles, if they have the opportunity, they could go down and pick up a roadkill item. Now, one of the things that is very important, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, is the issue of littering along our roadsides. Now, the problem is that not only is it ugly, and we should be very proud of our state and not litter at all to keep Georgia beautiful, but small animals, rodents, raccoons, possums are going to be attracted to that litter. They see that as a food source. And eagles and other birds of prey don't know to look left and right before they swoop down to either catch a rodent or a possum or something like that on the side of the road, or to pick up roadkill. So even if you toss out an apple core or a banana peel, you could be attracting a prey item that an eagle or a hawk might try to capture. And in doing so, you're opening them up to being hit by a car, and we certainly don't want that to happen. A lot of people have asked about the injury to the female's leg and how that could have happened. Well, it's possible that she was hit by a car, and when she was going after a piece of carrion or maybe a rodent or something on the side of the road. So please, take your litter home. We don't need it on the side of the road. We don't want to have any more injured wildlife. Okay, so we have another question from Emily Bankston. How much water do eagles require? Well, I could answer that question in a couple of different ways. And I'm not sure if you're interested in how much water do eagles drink or how much water do they need to hunt. Eagles prefer to hunt in aquatic type habitats, rivers, lakes, ponds, and you'll find them very, very frequently in those situations. They want to be hunting in a more of a shallow type situation, a shallow water type situation, so you're not going to find them, say, in the ocean. As far as drinking water, they will drink a little bit, and you don't see them bringing water to B3, and that's because all of the moisture that the eaglet needs is going to get from its food. So the eaglet will not drink any water while it's in the nest, but eagles do drink water from time to time, and they especially get water when they're hunting and catching prey. Okay, J.T. Atkins wants to know, what is the lifespan of eagles? Well, in the wild, it can be, on average, between 15 and 25 years. And in captivity, some eagles have been known to live as long as 30 years. So they are one of the longest lived of all of the birds. All right, Carolyn Garcia wants to know, the baby seems to be shaking this morning. Some are concerned that mom had it uncovered all night. Any comments about that? Well, it's hard to tell. The baby has that really nice, thick, down insulated feathering right now. It is getting able to regulate its own body temperature. I think what a lot of people don't realize is that the body temperature of birds is a lot higher than our own. Birds average around 104 to 106 degrees Fahrenheit, where we are just 98.6. So they don't feel cold temperatures quite like we do. And it's possible, even with the temperatures that we've had lately being sort of mild, and you know, we still feel the cold, that the baby is actually getting warmer than it would like, and it's probably moving around a little bit more than it was earlier, and that's the cue to the parents saying that, hey, I need to cool off a little bit, so give me some space. But as far as shaking, remember that the baby is growing so fast and it's learning to coordinate its movements. I think that's some of what you're seeing. Okay, why did they build so close to the parking lot? Well, that's a good question. And I would love to ask them, what was it about that particular location that they decided that this was a good place to build? Actually, eagles are becoming more and more urbanized. There are lots of instances of eagles building in residential areas, on golf courses, in places where we wouldn't normally expect a bird to want to build a nest. It's possible that the eagles felt, with all of the activity that occurs around this parking lot, that the chances of predators bothering them there is much reduced just because of the human activity. It's also possible that, as I think, maybe there was a hawk nest originally in that tree, and they just decided that, hey, this is a really good place to build this nest. It's a very large, sturdy tree, and this would present the best opportunity for us to have a really good nesting site, and that's why they chose it. Okay, Rhonda Beam wants to know, how long has the Eagle Cam been in place, and how was it installed? All right, so this is the first year of the Nest Cam, where we're actually looking into the nest. Last breeding season, we had a camera that was positioned on a pole quite a distance from the nest, so you could really only see the top of the tree and the nest. And the resolution was okay, wasn't the greatest, but you could see what was going on with the eagles flying in and out of the nest, but you really couldn't see in the nest itself. So we were really excited, and we're so grateful that Sony donated the camera. Georgia Power loaned one of their bucket trucks that was tall enough to reach up above the actual nest, so the camera could be fastened to one of the limbs and point down into the nest, so we can get a look at what's going on 24 hours a day. All right, so again, if you've just tuned in, I'm Renee Carleton. We're streaming live from Berry College. Still taking questions. We have plenty of time for your questions. If you have a question you'd like to ask, you can send a question via Twitter at #BCEagleChat or via email at publicrelations@berry.edu. All right. All right, B3 seems to have doubled in size. What is the estimated weekly growth rate? And that's from Judy Justice. Well, Judy, isn't it amazing how fast the little one has grown? And you're right, B3 isn't even 2 weeks yet and has doubled in size. Birds do grow at a very rapid rate. Some of that depends on how well they're being fed, and then of course we know that mom and dad are feeding B3 on a very, very regular basis. So we can expect B3 to actually reach the same size as its parents by about 4 months of age, and that's about the time it will fledge from the nest. If you think about birds in the wild, the nesting period is a very precarious time for them. So nature has given them a growth rate such that they will be able to leave the nest as soon as possible. I'll refer back to the eastern bluebirds that we have here on campus, which are, that's a particular project of mine. Eastern bluebirds, the babies hatch after 12 days of incubation. The eagles incubate their eggs for 35 days, and a baby bluebird leaves the nest after only 19 days. So they double in size within 1 day and reach their adult size in that short span of just under 3 weeks. So that's really amazing. Okay, Sylvia Lakachin asks, the eagle on the nest always seems alert. Do they sleep soundly for brief periods of time? Okay, that's a great question, Sylvia. They're always alert because there are dangers. If the nest was unattended, a predator and eaglets could become prey for a hawk, or as we saw previously, a great horned owl. Crows will sometimes come in and kill a baby eaglet. So the parent is always on guard, making sure that that eaglet is safe. And you've probably noticed from time to time who's ever sitting in the nest will nod off, usually only for a few minutes though, and then they're up listening and looking and making sure that everything's okay. But they do sleep quite soundly for very short periods of time. Okay, another question. All right, how does mom digest a whole coot head? And that's from Bob Swinson. Well, Bob, eagles having evolved to be carnivorous animals, their digestive systems has a way of processing that material. You've probably noticed that the adult eagles do swallow quite large pieces of coots and fish from time to time. Like owls, they will regurgitate the items that are not digestible, and that would be the bones or the feathers. So an eagle has the ability to stretch out its esophagus, that's the tube that goes from the mouth to the stomach, so that it can accommodate large items of food, and then when it needs to get rid of things that can't be digested, they just simply regurgitate that up, and that's called a pellet. Okay. We have 5 more minutes, so we have time for some more questions, if you can get those in right away. All right, Wyatt and Terry Luce want to know, how can eagles regulate their body temperature during severe cold weather? And the answer to that is the wonderful feathering that nature has given them. If you think about a goose down jacket or a goose down comforter, how warm we are when we're using those items. Well, feathers on an eagle's body is the same way. Basically, eagles having a higher body temperature than us, they feel a little bit warmer in cold weather than we do. Also, they have muscles that will elevate the feathers just a bit and trap warm air inside and around those feathers, and that helps insulate their bodies also. You may not know that the largest concentration of eagles in North America occurs in Alaska, and of course we know that Alaska experiences very, very cold temperatures down below 0, and the eagles tolerate that just fine. So they're perfectly adapted to cold weather. Okay, Lyra Griffith asks, from the owl attack, has it been around again? I don't think anybody has really seen it come back. I think it realized that once it wasn't going to scare mother away from the nest, that wasn't the greatest idea to try that trick again. As far as other predators are around. Now, eagles have had to deal with things like raccoons and bobcats, now not necessarily our pair, but eagles in other parts of the country. Crows, other hawks, or other eagles even can come in and kill eaglets. So there are always dangers out there, and this pair is very, very diligent in making sure that their eaglet is okay. All right, Joey Jones, how long do the parents care for the baby bird until it goes on its own? All right, well, obviously they're taking very good care of it right now. That process will continue for about 3.5 more months. After B3 fledges, which means leaves the nest, the parents will continue to feed it on an ongoing basis, although what they'll do is start decreasing the amount of food that they give B3, and that encourages B3 to start to learn to hunt on its own. So they will be continuing parental duties for a while yet. Okay, this will be the last question from Tamara McMurdy. Why are we all so attached to this eagle family? That's a great question. I just love the attention that the eagles have gotten through the Eagle Cam and the people that have come to see the eagles. And if we think about it, the eagle is such a symbol of our country. It was chosen as our national symbol in 1782. It's the species that is unique to North America. It's a symbol of freedom and fierce spirit, and so magnificent. I think that's why everybody loves the eagles. So they are something that I think everybody can be encouraged by and really be proud of, that we have the eagles here. All right, so we are at the end of our time period. I'd like to thank everyone for watching today. Don't forget to keep watching the Eagle Cam at berry.edu/EagleCam. And also you can like the Berry College Eagles on their Facebook page. Continue to watch. We have a lot more time to enjoy the growth of B3 in the family. And one of these days, not in the too far distant future, we'll be watching for that first